Hi, it's Susan, and I'm from Worldpeacefull, and I'm going to talk a little bit about. Pardon me, I had a cry this morning. I make off because I'm very run down, and I've darkened the space I'm living in because really, when you're homeless or displaced, the more I'm going to try and talk in more accurate terms away from the labelling of homelessness because people go, "Oh, homeless, poor thing," and I'm so overseeing those looks in people's eyes rather than how can we constructively solve this. And I'm talking compassionate people too. They all do the same thing, but no one gets involved. Oh, what if you're a problem? What if you're a burden? You cost us money. This is the selfishness in our society that's part of the culture now. And it certainly wasn't the original culture. Our Australian culture was really mucking in and helping each other. And I know in my life experience as a world peace clown, when I travelled the world, I gave everything to everybody. And even in these years, 2.5 years that I've been homeless or without a home and without income, I'm still giving, working out what's going on because I don't want it to happen to other people. I want a better society, without a doubt. And some of the grief I was feeling, before was really due to the loss of my society. And I might even cry again because I tell you, I'm actually really, really upset with the surveillance. I'm very upset with, this dark attitude around the public, not the public themselves, but toward the public. The lack of compassion towards those in real need, which was part of our charter. We're becoming divided. The people that I meet on the street, I find to be good people. And I'm talking about everyone, everyday people. I meet a lot of people because I'm very open. And people like me instantly. I often get a lot of positive response. And it's the attitude within governance, it's the attitude within organisations at the top, and these are the top ones. They're the ones I'm most concerned about because I'm seeing a hard-heartedness there. And the reality of poverty, the reality of hardship has been denied in those who within those who have the power to make the change, really fundamental change to assist society. The poverty itself they don't get. They're too busy victim blaming those in poverty, and there's a bullying element to this where they're clearly getting a sense of power out of really hurting those at the bottom, and those at the bottom are hurting without a doubt. And then people go, oh, it's all too heavy. It's not. It's structural violence being caused by economics. And I actually do want to talk about economics, but I'm going to have to open up the blind because I need to read it. So this is going to be kind of an unusual video. I will try and go still, which is what I usually do, to try and get more of a flow because I'm here to really serve my society. I'm not interested in just venting hurt or pain around. It's not only just the structures of violence that I'm seeing here, which is the exclusion due to homelessness because you're not on Centrelink. That's a structural violence. Structural violence in terms of income differences. So if you have a higher income, you can access everything that you want. If you have a low to zero income, you can't access anything. So there's an exclusion. It's a structural exclusion on the basis of income, and it affects you because you're the one who gets rejected. So as a feeling, emotional human being, you suffer as a result of this. And there's many people suffering because they blame themselves for structures that have been put in place that they have no concept of. They do not understand Keynesian economics. They don't understand the tension between Hayek and Keynes, Maynard Keynes, because this is where the seat of this problem is sitting, is in those aligned with Milton Friedman. They're the monetarists, those who saw Adam Smith as just saying it's free markets, it's a free-for-all. No, it's not. That's not what Adam Smith was about. He was actually very compassionate, Adam Smith. He was far more of a deep social thinker than he's been promoted as. What happens is people with selfish motives will select out of these economists the rationales that suit their means. It's got nothing to do with the actual economists themselves, but they're used in order for people to deregulate an economy so that they're not in any way held to account. And that's what deregulation is about. It's about maximising profit and not being held to account. So the negative externalities, and in economics, that means the negative consequences of those market actions, such as pollution, electrosmog would be a externality that no one can see. This is your EMF coming in through your phones, your Wi-Fi, all that. I'm just giving a picture around this. The externalities through foods being chemicalised. There's chemicals in the food that causes eventual death. But it's done in such a way that it preserves the food, but if the person lived to, say, 100, they'd probably die of these chemicals in the foods. I think that's pretty much how they rationalise it. But there's a pathological mind behind that cares nothing about the consequences of its own actions. Other externalities are having too many people in cities, building all these roads in order to keep a market system maximising profit when you've got an ecological crisis sitting around you. That's not only poor governance, it's actually crimes against humanity in actual fact. We're still in the same systems that are causing all the problems. They're causing mental health. 1 in 4 is an externality. Homelessness, 116,000 homeless, is an externality of a system. It's not the fault of the people. 116,000, you can't blame them all for not being able to get a home. It means the housing sector is being stimulated by not enough regulations on capping rents or capping property values, but then people get taxes out of, the government gets taxes out of property values. So there's a vested interest in having them go higher. The real estate agents are jumping for joy because they're millionaires overnight. They're getting them to do auctions, even for rent. They're getting them to do auctions. This is greed. This needs to be regulated. If you're a responsible government, you do not allow the unfettered market capitalism to just take off because it harms people. This is why Maynard Keynes, and they go, oh, that's left-wing economics. No, it's not. He was one of the most brilliant economists of our time. And the reason he became so well-known and famous was because his economics was more about government intervention. And then we've got schools of thought developing around, market intervention, that's going to crowd out private opportunity. No, it's not. There were very real reasons why the government intervened. Certainly, he became known because of the Depression, the 1930s Depression, and he solved the problem of the Depression because the market could not stimulate itself. Demand fell off. So when people lost jobs, they couldn't buy products, which is a signal, it's a profit into the system, it's revenue into the system, which gives it a kick start to the system if there's enough of that revenue coming in. So when the Depression happened, people were losing jobs, then they were not spending, and it becomes like a downward spiral. Then businesses shut because they can't make enough money to cover their costs. So basic economics is really, you've got to be able to cover your costs with enough revenue in order to trade. Now, if your revenue base is not attacked too much through taxation or other sort of costs of production, then you'll be able to survive in the marketplace, so to speak, which is like the jungle, really. It's dog eat dog out there in some of these industries where it's very ruthless, particularly with the large multinationals. They're the ones that we need to have the real conversation around because they're influencing governments and they're taking over governments. That, to me, part of my grief that I had today when I was crying was, the real loss of the welfare state. And it's not some nanny state. These hard-hearted ones who are sitting up there in their ivory towers, and they are ivory towers. This is not a nanny state. It's a consequence of market activity, which is typically not typically, let's say 100% self-oriented. It's like living with a very selfish person who only thinks of their own needs. It's all about them. And then they'll go out and they'll say, well, and I'm not trying to make this a masculine thing, but it predominantly is, to be honest. It's a mindset that's anchored in the masculine, would be more accurate, where they go out and they say, I'm making all the money, therefore I need to be looked after. Well, no, we're a community. This is the feminine side. The feminine side goes and looks at that other and says, hang on, it's not all about you. You've actually got others here. Dependence. And a far-right thinker would go, dependency, we don't want that. People are interdependent naturally. It actually is what enabled this species to survive. It's why we're the most resilient species, is because we have depended on each other and it's worked. We've also, out of love for one another, produced technologies, produced skills in order to make things, in order to produce food, etc., for the greater group. And in fact, the whole economic system in its absolute quintessential essence was really about setting up a system that would allocate resources effectively and fairly for the betterment of the people. It was about keeping the prices down. It was about ensuring activity occurred so that people came out of grueling hardship. The tax system is not about minimising tax. It was about reallocating wealth. So those who have gone into the tax havens, the Virgin Islands, wherever you're stashing your cash, money laundering through the city-states. I'd be very interested to do more research on the city-states around the world. The three that I know of is Washington, DC, City of London, and the Vatican. I'd like to know about them. I'd like to know about what happens with these city-states. I'd like to know why they are independent, almost like countries. And I'd like to know about how that money is moving through those systems, where it's going, where it's coming from. And that's because we want organised crime to stop around the world. We do not want liquidity going unaccounted into areas that's not in the public interest at all. So this early market economics was always about the people. It was about allocating the resources fairly. Taxation was to ensure what we call progressive taxation, which was a sliding scale of taxation. So those who are earning the most money pay the highest tax rate. Now, during the Second World War, they're up around 98%. They've now flattened the tax rate, I think, to 30% now. I'll have a check at the budget, but that's what I think they've done. And they go, we need more liquidity so that we can expand our operation. That's untrue. You're getting liquidity through equity finances who are scooping up the superannuation funds. So the money is well and truly out there, but where is it being directed? It's certainly not being directed to those who need it most. It's being directed in this juggernaut of self-interest, this celebration of grandeur, and it's a delusional form of grandeur. It's being channeled into areas that are not serving humanity's real needs. It's going into the IT sector, it's going into sensors, it's going into smart cities, it's going into infrastructure projects, which are extremely expensive to the public, and they're not being financed by the public revenue, which they should be. That was public works, it used to be called. What we're seeing now is globalisation and globalists coming in and funding these large projects, and then they're acquiring the asset. I've certainly read a report where I'm seeing a company is funding it in order for it to be economically viable for it, a good business proposition. They have to know that they're going to get revenue flowing out of it. They either do it through users pay, which means the public pays more for an asset that they would have got for free, and then the asset gets transferred across to that private sector entity. This is not in the public interest, but no one talks about it. All our economics commentators, we all cast a blind eye. This is why the independent media is rising, is because the truth is not being told to people. People are suffering terribly through this, particularly at the lowest end, homeless, and those who are in serious poverty, who are paying bills to live. And those at the top say, oh, well, useless eaters. They're not. They are worthy, they are talented, they are exceptionally hard workers and very giving. You'll find usually in the poorest areas are the kindest people. I knew that when I saw the people in India, in some of the poorest slums. They're the most generous. Interestingly enough, in one of the books I do want to read a little bit out of, it does talk about the generosity of Australians actually in our culture, and other cultures not sharing that same generosity of spirit, where they're all driven by money, driven by class systems. This country wasn't driven by any of that. You know, we came from the convicts, which I feel very proud to have come from the Celts and the convicts, because they were the poorest of the poor in places like Britain, or in Britain. But they were the ones most discriminated against because of their background. They weren't English. They were Celts, and the Celts have a history of real spiritual culture. They are the poets, the musicians. They were incredibly hard workers. They were working in the coal mines. You know, they were speaking obviously in a very different way to the English. I actually met a Celt yesterday on the street. She was like, I would say 85. Her first language was Welsh. And I actually noticed her because she was wearing colourful clothes. I always talk to people. And she counted to 10 in Welsh for me. And then she told me where I could go if I want to learn Welsh. And I was thinking, that's my history. You know, the Celts are my history, and I don't know anything about them. The English were not in my background. Scottish and Welsh were. And you'll find many Australians come from that background, where we've got within us the awareness of that grinding poverty and the hard work. Australians are hard workers, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, get them on a good day and they're really fantastic. They'll chip in and they'll help each other. But there is a selfishness that's coming into our culture, and it's come from other cultures, and I know it has, and it's come from greed, and it's come from, you know, wanting to live the high life, which is not the best life. You know, if I could convey to people, the best life is the free life. Best life is when you get to make your own choices, when you get to follow what you love. That's the best life. And I believe that's the life that this higher power intended, was for our free dominion, definitely. And we are part of that ecosystem. We're part of that nature. But we've been structured into economics, by economics, and by the captains of industry who want the world in their image. They want to fight against nature, and they are fighting against nature. The way that they're extracting exploitatively across the world and saying, oh, well, we've got to feed demand here. But they're also stimulating it. And it creates massive, massive imbalances in nature. It really does. And the really candid conversations are not really happening because there's so many vested interests and everybody's looking at each other to see what the other's saying and doing. And they don't want to be excluded from the club. And it's like, get excluded from the club, for God's sake, if you know what is being said is wrong. If you know that we're actually destroying the next generations through this absolute conspicuous consumption, much of it has got built-in obsolescence, which means it falls apart, it fails. If you know and you're talking with people and you can hear that these things are untrue, what are being said, you need to speak up. Do it with love and respect, of course, because I'm not in for division, them against us. I couldn't care less about any of that. But what I see is massive problems on the ground as a person experiencing homelessness, severe poverty, no income. There's a trajectory from this point that I can see that you can't see. because you're not in my shoes. You're not the one who's being silently excluded on the basis of status, which is a false economy. And I use economy deliberately there because it's very fake. It's caused by economy, which only values people on the basis of economic generation of wealth. I've even had people in service clubs exclude me on the basis of economic, what do they say, unviability. When in actual fact, the Real Hope program, which is what I was going to launch off into, which was peace education for children, peace, non-violence, anti-bullying, which worked, which could actually have provided a fantastic foundation for children, dealing with the bullying issues that they're confronting now, which is coming from the adults. But I was confronted with Service Club, who was supposed to be out there doing good around the world, certain attitudes within that Service Club coming from the higher socioeconomic status, because I met them, withdrew funding from me because I was economically unviable in their eyes, and yet I wasn't. Peace is not. Peace probably is economically unviable if we really drill down, because peace means that you actually find happiness within yourself. You're not seeking it through consumption, which is what they want. And that sort of figurative they is really just a mindset that believes that it's its identity. So those people who house mindsets of, and I'm going to say, well, far left, far right, I really personally don't, I have a care factor of 0 on where they sit on these political spectrums. I don't really care. I'm only interested in the impact of mindsets that have no lived experience or have not been grounded in reality, who are believing the myths they've spun around certain ideologies which have enabled them to continue on with behaviours that are actually impacting the lives of millions with no consequence. Now that statement, no consequence, is the big one. When you're not accountable, when money talks, when it's all about the money, and your personal value and worth is on a spreadsheet, like a balance sheet, and there's your personal fortune. Oh, I'm worth 30 million. I was just going through heads of state online where they were talking about their many millions. That's been their platform in order to get into politics and represent us. There's no representation when you're coming from millionaire status. You have no clue. You just go, oh, no, it's economics. You've got to make more money. Gina Reinhardt, I was told, said that. Go on, just go make more money. No lived experience on the ground. She hasn't worked in 400 companies. I have. She hasn't done an economics degree. I have. She hasn't worked with children, taught them education. I have. She hasn't travelled the world alone as a woman. She hasn't gone around Australia by herself without her millions, eking out of where need equals want. I've done that. And yet she'll be Business Review Weekly. She'll be the richest person. She'll be showcased as this is what a high life is like, as if that's got some merit. No offence to her. I'm not trying to be unkind to her. As a human being, she has merit, of course, and I value her equally to anyone. I'm just utilising that example because those who have money have been represented as the goal for everyone to follow. Well, it's not. In an ecologically collapsing system, it is not the goal. In fact, it's, from those of us who know economics, it's actually a massive distortion to value those who are making millions, billions and trillions and put them right at the top and say, aren't they terrific? They've not worked hard for that money. They're often gaining rents. Now, in economics, we talk about rents. This is the rent that you take when someone is renting a house. There might be property rents. They're on your land. Even taxes are a form of rent because people are having to pay tax. Typically, it's on profit. The rents would be things like buildings. There'll be all sorts of rents, but ultimately it's making profit out of others. So those people have to pay that money in order to get access to something. So the person is not earning money in equivalence to the amount of work or energy they expend as a contribution to their community. They're sitting up there on piles and piles of money that's been acquired because they bought lots of properties. Like the real estate agents would be a classic case. Property developers, classic case. Loads of money they're making out of these properties. And they're not that, in my opinion, they don't look that well built to me. I'm sitting in a double brick house and the temperature's 10 degrees cooler. On a 44-degree heat day, I'm sitting in probably 25 degrees. So you're talking 20 degrees cooler than the outside. Well-built house, it's solid. But then some of these other flimsy infrastructures that they've created to whip up housing very quickly, they're not bricking it all up. Those ones are very hot in summer. So from an ecological point, anyone can see they're going to use more electricity because they're going to be, generating air conditioning. They are going to be using more energy devices in order to have their needs met when things are not built properly. If there's not natural light coming in, they'll turn on the lights. And for those who are in the coal industry, who have, infiltrated bloody government, their interest as an industry is to extract more coal, to generate more electricity. So the economics works against us from an ecological perspective. And it's a juggernaut. They don't know how to get off. They have to be showing their shareholders they're creating increasing yields each year. So that's your dilemma. We're dealing in an economic system, particularly those who've, the private ones, they conceal all their, they can conceal far more easily. The publicly listed companies do have to provide annual reports. They do have to be accountable to shareholders who have invested in them. And it has to be seen to be a growing yield. If the yield's falling, they'll have to cut staff. There's all sorts of implications where the whole system's geared for growth. Infinite growth modelling, I call it. It's not geared for balance or homeostasis. And because everyone's making independent, individualistic decisions, there's no concept of the whole. And then we have specific market segments, like the IT industry, for example, who actually nearly collapsed in 2008 when the banks orchestrated these subprime loans to poorest people who had no, and this is again where the poor are exploited yet again. I'm just going to bring this one in. And then they were all trading repackaged debt. And then it was being sold in such a way that those who took on the debt, the next buyer of the debt, could trust that was fine, that those debts would be viable. But when you lend to the poorest people who don't have much in the way of cash to be able to pay you back, and they default, then they take the asset. And that's one of my concerns, is the deliberate, and that's a deliberate situation when and deregulation, they don't have to ensure that they have done the appropriate checks, that they have enough assets in order to pay for that debt. So they get out there and they sell these. This is what greed does, and this is how greed takes people over. They don't care about the consequence of those people losing their homes. And I remember the scenes of people being evicted from their housing and those equity banks taking those assets. This is theft in my book. Theft. And then they get the community through tax. The tax takes on the government takes on the risk. This is the strategy. We bail them out. We need the banks. Bail them out. And that's what the big hue and cry was about. Everyone was so angry that they had actually bailed out these guys so they could continue on with their Learjets. So they could continue on with their multi-million-dollar lives, whilst these people can go eat cake. And that's your Marie Antoinette scenario. Go eat cake. You're a nothing. We don't respect you. You don't know how to make money. I want to sit with that for a moment because I feel it as very, very important. Interestingly enough, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I can also see left-wing politics, right-wing politics there. Left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. I've got magic sleight of hand. So this is your creative accounting that looks bona fide on the surface, but underneath there's all sorts of stuff going on. I also felt the human condition, the human race, as part of the one body. So the hand, the leg, torso, the body, we're all connected. So the poor are connected to the wealthy. But they live these separate existences. And there's certainly been literature around, like prime ministers making statement, British prime minister, which I'll read out. I'll make it the next video where I read out from The Economist. But making these statements that they're different planets. We separate them, and they called it. I think it was one of also our literary poets, Lawson, who was talking about forward. It's like they were on a boat and they were in the forward, compartment. It was written a little bit differently from that era, and the women had to eat separately. These are the poor women have to eat separately because they might steal, you see. And the sort of the lower classes, put them down in the bottom of the boat. So if it takes on water, they go first. Everything's arranged by class, something totally hard to fathom from an Australian point of view, because we see everybody as the same. Those of us who have grown up in egalitarianism, we all see each other the same. And we look at those who are well-to-do as just having more money. That's actually very true. Oh, he's got more money. Although there are attitudes and cultural change coming in through Fox, coming through good old Murdoch, who's a fellow Australian. And, I want to go still on Murdoch because I want to say something here because of my poverty. It's come from the pain I felt this morning. And I've done a video on him before where I really liked him, and that was without knowing what he's been up to too much. I mean, I did look at it a little bit and I knew he was owning the media. But when I did that video, I liked him. And I believe that was an authentic feeling I had of liking him as a person without all his wealth. I didn't give a toss about his wealth or his status. I don't give a toss about his power. I don't give a toss about his association with Reagan and what his little machinations in Central and South America were. I don't care. But I feel to say something, so I'm going to go still. It's really funny. When you go into stillness, you never know what's going to come up. And I'll be honest, my sadness came up for him. I feel like I want to cry for him. I actually do. There's pain in Rupert. Just let me sit with it because I feel compassion for him, actually. Isn't that funny? A guy who's the richest guy, who's got control of all the media, and I feel deep compassion for him. Not unlike poverty. Just want to go there. He's been hurt. Yeah, I hope he doesn't mind if I just say what I feel. And that's actually to do with relationships. Unexpected, but there you go. He's been hurt. Doesn't think he's good enough. That's what it is. So this will come in from a space of great love for him, actually. When I was feeling annoyed with him, I'll go still again. Yeah, I just want to cry. But tears are there for sure. I don't know if he recognises the implications of what he's done. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why I feel such a deep sorrow for him. You can have everything, and have nothing. The very things that he really wanted, he didn't get. And I thought of his sister Helen, actually, because I didn't meet Helen personally, but Helen funded me to go to Russia with Patch Adams. I sort of felt a feeling of her as well when I went to connect with him. And his mum too. I don't know much about his family, but the little I do know is that his mother was a very, very kind person, a very good woman. See, I don't even know her name. What, Elizabeth Murdoch? I'm not sure. See, I don't know. I know things have been named after her because I don't really look there. Helen was really lovely. Helen Hanbury. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's her name, Helen. Just want to go still for a bit. I don't really even know why. Yeah, I do. You can tell I'm going still and it's real because what I'm about to say is not something I would have said. I'm feeling huge compassion for those at the top. Wow, that's a turnaround, isn't it? I actually feel, I'm just going to go still on it a bit because I want to understand it a bit better. See, the words, you can have everything but have nothing, come to me. So I guess the great poverty and the great wealth are the mirror of the same thing. They're both in poverty. That's what I'm getting. They're both in poverty, but it's expressed differently. See, the thing is, when you're at the top and you've got all the money, people come around you and they're not truthful to you. I mean, the difference is when you're at the bottom, they're very truthful to you. They're not interested. Because they can't get anything from you, you see. So if somebody's good to you, you're going to know it's real. If they're not good to you, there's nothing they can get from you. Self-interest. Now, if we go to the top, these are the ones who are the millionaires, the billionaires. Some of them have assets to trillions. These are the really big ones at the very top. When I say big ones, I'm not saying better. I'm saying big in terms of equity. But if we were to really look at it with clear seeing, they're just human beings. But people build it all up in their minds because we're very perceptual. We're not really factual. We're very perceptual as human beings. So we perceive greatness. We perceive these, the top, they've got everything. They've got nothing, is the feeling. Pardon me. Sorry about burping a bit. I have my coffee. So you don't know who's real. People are. I'm going to use an Australian colloquialism here. People are sucking up. They want something from you. Always someone's wanting something from you. It's really, and you're feeling that you have to keep providing for others. There's hangers on. There's hangers on all around them. When people get rich, they end up with a lot of hangers on and people depending on them for their wages and all the rest of it. And they have to keep up appearances. They have to be seen to be on top of the game. So there's a constant pressure on them. And they're trying to maintain their wealth because their whole power structure is built on the money. It's not unlike when you see people who've been very powerful fall from grace. Like what we're seeing with the royal family, in actual fact, that's falling from grace. And that started with Princess Diana. It did. There's a lot coming up out of situation there. And it's the same with the Queen. She's also got a lot of hangers on and she's been born into this. So she would not know who she is. She would never have had the time. She's been out, doing the royal, propaganda comes to my mind, but I'm wondering if there's another word. Because they have to keep promoting the royal family. They have to be seen to be a people's royal family. There's a lot of work in that, and there's a lot of entourage around all of that. But as a human being, she wouldn't know herself because she's never really had the time alone. And everyone's constantly giving her, accolades. So the drama in her own family is probably causing her a lot of pain. But ultimately, they lose a sense of who they really are. And I think there's great suffering there. You can easily fall into an illusionary life when you're in a lot of wealth. It is an illusionary life. People can say, oh, well, you should be happy when you've got all these things, yet the person's depressed or the person wants to end their life because it didn't bring them what they thought they really needed, which is human love. It's belonging in a community. I mean, we are community people, but on an equal basis. Where someone challenges you, get a bit of a challenge happening. Someone says, I don't like you. That's actually good for them to experience that because then they get challenged and they go, okay, well, I'm going to say something back. Have a bit of a fight. Stirs them up. So what the poverty is there is not feeling the vitality for life. That's what it is. They're not feeling challenged because everything's given to them. And see, that makes you lazy in a way. I mean, there's no disrespect in that. I just mean that you just get, it's all given to you. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to really win it because the prize is often in that struggle. The real depth of life is in the struggle in actual fact. It was like, I'll give you an example. It was like when I remember being a market analyst and and I always remember this, I was in a hotel room in South Australia. I was up near the, where was I? I always forget the name of that lake. It's a blue lake. It's kind of a volcanic lake. It's well known in South Australia. Just trying to think what it's called. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Believe it or not, I was doing research into pandemics. Interesting what's going on right now. I don't know what I think about that. It's only 80 deaths, and I'm saying that as in I send love to the 80 who've died, their families. But 80 is not a big number. There's some research that needs to go into that, given the consequences of it and given trade wars. They were my first thoughts around that. So I'm just throwing that one in as public and freedom of speech. Curious, I am. So I was in the hotel room and I was remembering feeling this is not challenging. I had the money too. I was making good money as a market analyst. And I just remember this is not challenging. And you know what? I've been 2.5 years homeless without a house and without income. And it's challenging, believe me. On a lot of levels, it's making me go deep. I have to bloody solve my problems. And these problems are externalities that I'm experiencing through the system and through attitudes I've encountered. And religious, and it's funny how religious just came up then. I didn't actually think that. I'm going to sit with that for a moment because the way it came up, I was actually going for ideology. So right-wing ideology, I have to be honest, and because I wasn't really looking into ideology much, because I'm not reading the papers, I wasn't really, and I'm not really that political, haven't really been interested. But it came up powerfully when I've had challenges. So I want to go into the religion because of the way it came up, because I'm an intuit, I'm intuitive. It's funny, I'm getting chills up my neck. And I got it around Murdoch too when I had a lot of sensation around my back when I was thinking of him and the great sorrow that came up. So he's still, and when I speak like this, and he's coming around my thought process, I'm feeling him as part of religion. Isn't that interesting? I'm feeling the links. There's religious, and I know he had, see, I can feel the pain. He had pain as a child, religious school. He went to a boys' school, just out of Melbourne here. He had suffering. This pain is coming from that. He's coming from childhood pain. And I feel to say love for him, and it's a genuine love. It's not, I don't give a toss about the money. Couldn't care less. It's real love for Rupert Murdoch. Religion has a lot to answer for, as we know, with the pedophilia. And in politics, there's rings. This is serious stuff. Okay, but I want to take it away from the seriousness, but I want to go into the religion with compassion around it as well. Although I get control structure very strongly. And it links to the economics as well. Order out of chaos just came. Religion. I just want to go to religion for a moment. Well, it's mind control. So, I say that with respect for those who follow books, who really love their books and who've got great solace from their books. I'm not saying put down your book. If you want to read your book, read it. If it brings you peace and it makes you happy, I'm all for it. But the religion as a structure of violence is the card that's not been face up on the table. Religion as a structure of violence, economics as a structure of violence, order out of chaos, right? It's coming from taking me away from knowing my own wisdom and truth, believing in something outside of myself. And see, economics is a religion, has become a religion with ideology. Fundamentally believe that this is the panacea until the ship sinks. I see it as a Titanic. So, and there's also religion infused in politics and government and economics too. It's fused. That's the inspiration I'm getting very strongly. Do as I say. So it has patriarchal, the Father image, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, not mother, daughter, Holy Spirit. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, they say, don't they? Yep. So it connects through the patriarchal line. So I'm getting bloodlines as well. Religious. I can go into lots of directions here, but I might just try and stay just with religion for the moment. I have to laugh. Tony Abbott comes up. I'll just pop him down. Priesthood. It's a brotherhood. Brotherhood. Religion, politics, economics, brotherhood. Fraternity. Okay, so it's kind of building community so they can have more power. It's a power construct. And when people give their power away, whether it be through economics, politics, because the authority knows better, when they give their power away, it actually gives the other more power. And this is where a great distortion happens because we're all equal. We're no longer trusting, and that's not to say that teachings and sharings from wisdom, from experience, from higher knowledge is not a wonderful thing. It can be. When you're in community together and you're feeling a sense of values. I'm just going into why they love religion. So I'm going there because I feel love as well. Feeling of belonging, that you've got a tribe, and that's very an ancient aspect to us, where we need to feel tribe. And there's songs, singings that lifts the spirit, gives us a sense of connectedness because we're wanting to feel. So many of them are, okay, I'm getting up at the topper end, going into religion because I want to feel. They also want to purge guilt. There's guilt that's being purged as well through religious ritual, as in a church. Could be a mosque, could be Buddhist, anything where you're handing your power to something who knows better. Could be a university even, we hand our power, the academic knows better. So we give them more power and then they get more prestige and then they get an inflated sense of who they are. Then they think they're better than us and holier than thou comes to mind. So I'm only just saying that wherever power has been given to another party, it's problematic. That's where the inherent distortion is. And they think they know better and you should do as we say, I'm born to rule, and on it goes. They want to touch the sacred as well. So they're coming together in this way. And typically the religion is what? They'll come under that one thing and then they feel that bonding under, there's a word that I'm sort of seeking for at the moment. Alter. I'm getting the word alter. You can use that word in another way too, alter circumstances. They're going to alter. Seeking guidance because they don't know what to do. So isn't it interesting? I've come full circle from the feeling of great poverty, and I was feeling really upset before. I had a good cry. And I felt displaced, because I've got to try and find somewhere to live, and it's been hard because I don't like staying on people's. I don't like to stay long at people's places, and I've sort of found myself a little bit stuck for the moment, and I don't want to take advantage of a kindness that's been given to me. I want to be independent, but it's difficult when you don't have money. It's challenging, right? So should I take it on as a challenge? Yes, I should. I shouldn't take it as a downer. I should say, okay, it's a good thing. So yes, it's grist for the mill. There's no doubt about it. It's made me a greater person. There's no doubt about it. I've had to dig deep to solve these problems and come out with these videos. I mean, this stuff would never have emerged had I not gone through the hardship. So for those at the top, they're living in poverty too, and the ones at the bottom are living in poverty. But one's a material poverty and the other one's a spiritual poverty is what I'm getting. They're actually the same thing, but two different sides of the same coin. Both distortions in respect of human condition. If we place it into economics, they're distortions in an economic system of materialism. And then we've got the ecological collapse, and it is a collapse that's happening around us, where those who are at the top don't know how to change. They don't know how to move beyond this system. That's all they know, and their whole identity is hooked onto it. So I want to say to you before I close with this, your identity is not the system. That's the fake news. It's not. It's the false economy. Now, let's say you lose everything when the ecology collapses and let's say people run amok and the smart cities doesn't happen and you can't get that control exercised. Let's say it doesn't happen. There's great fear around vulnerability. So you start to feel human, right? Just like those at the bottom, because you're the same. We strip away all your assets, and I'm saying this with love, but with humour as well. Strip away all your assets and you're just me. You are me, remember? And that's the fear, is that you are me. Because you want to be this great, grandiose, wonderful, You want to feel the abundance of having whatever you want whenever you want, but it's not the real life. And I'm just going to say to you, from someone who's lived in a few worlds, which I haven't lived in the super rich, but I've certainly been with wealthy people. I actually felt sorry for them as well because I saw the fake world they were in, and I didn't want that. It's not a choice I would make. And those with all the money, I don't want all that. I have chosen, I don't want to be out of balance. And my instinct told me, don't go into that, because, like, if I became a manager, for example, I have skills of leadership without a doubt. I'm a leader, but I don't want to lead. Why? Because I want people to lead themselves. That's the true leadership, is empowering them to realise they're their own leader. Everyone goes, oh, we don't want that. We want them all dependent. We want them all locked into the grid. No, you don't, because we're about to do an evolutionary jump, and they're not going to stay in that grid. It's a delusion that's been created at higher levels of people who are not grounded, because you've not lived where I live, right? You don't know. And you can gather your intelligence till the ends of the earth. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't mean you know. You can't be an all-seeing eye, because you're not. That's the truth of it. You're not. The all-seeing eye is the higher intelligence, which we are all part of. We are part of the one thing, the one intelligence, playing out a part of separation, having this extraordinarily rich, diverse experience of tasting life as in poverty, tasting life wealthy, tasting life as the mother, as the father, as the grandparent, as the disabled child, as the one with AIDS, the one with cancer. This intelligence is experiencing all of it. That's why you say the spark is within. It is. That's why the human race is such a jewel. And it is a jewel. Everyone is. We are all incredible. We're amazingly resilient. We are incredibly kind. We can be really nasty as well, and we can bully the bags out of each other, which we do, because we want power, thinking, I take your power, I get more. More is less. There's truth in that. What is it? As above, so below. As above, so below is what you're wanting. That's balance. It's not the top of the pyramid. I often go there because I send them love too, of course. It's not the top of the pyramid. It's not even a pyramid. Okay, what is it? It's a circle. So it's the center of the circle. It's the point of light. So it doesn't really have a shape or form, in truth. So what I'm talking about when I speak in this way is I'm talking about the real power to know thyself. This video has taken us on a journey from where I was pretty passionate at the beginning, and now you can feel with my energy I'm coming back to 0 point, which is peace. And the reason I'm coming to peace is I'm starting to understand those at the top intuitively. And when I say the top, I'm just talking materially. I don't actually see them at the top in truth. I actually see them as equal to me. They are me. They're an aspect of me. I could be a one at the top. I can be one at the bottom. I can be any of it. It's all a question of choice. I'm not choosing that because I don't consider that to be exciting enough. Those who do it tough, and it can be a hard life, and I'm just remembering people who I met who were bonded labourers, fingers worn to the bone, or those who've had really dreadful experiences. There's no glory around that, of course, but there's an experience, there's a learning, there's an empathy that grows from great hardship. And what the empathy is it's actually a joining one to the other. And that's the longing for those at the top, is to join with others. on an equal, to be seen. Yeah, see, I can feel the tears. The words I'm feeling is, I see you. That's the longing, the real you. So we're all in it together is my message with this video. We're all in it together, no matter which side of the fence you sit on. Just remember that we make up the labels. We pit one against the other by becoming clubs. I'm a this and you're a that. I'm a this ideological group, you're that. And we create these fictitious wars to generate some energy around combat, the fighting. And while that happens, our infinite potential is being minimized when we could go on to much greater things. But we get bogged down in the ego struggle for dominance, the ego struggle to be seen as better than others when you're in truth not. But you've got extraordinary talents, as does everybody. So the real challenge for us is to move out of this linear thinking, this really limited thinking, and to start to come into a much more powerful, productive, connected, integrated way of being, where the sum of the parts is the whole. But from that position of homeostasis, of equality, which is a desirable outcome, oh my goodness, it's a hugely desirable aspect, because balance is the peace that passeth all understanding. Balance is the ecological sustainability that thrives, which more than survives. These machinations of I am better than you because deep down I actually don't feel good enough. That's where the work is. For those of you who have really cleaved onto power and status, it's coming from a base of I'm not good enough. And you didn't get what you needed when you were very young. You've been either hived off to nannies to raise you, but you haven't felt that beautiful love from your mum or your dad, where you've really felt them around you. They've been off busy making money, because you're a product of that as well. That's the poverty. It's real poverty of spirit you've not felt. And that's why you disconnect from other people. You don't feel anything. You see it as objects and you see it as chessboard. It's all games, but it's not real. And that's the message of this video. We've got to make it real. And that means you have to come home to who you are. Give away everything and see what happens. Do what Buddha did. That would be a really amazing experience for you. And just blend in with the people. Go and have a look. You'd be amazed. There's magic everywhere. We live in an amazing world, in actual fact. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I send you peace. I send you love. I send you healing. And I send you abundance. I send the richest people true abundance, which is fulfillment within and self-love within. Because you too are truly worthy, and it doesn't depend on what you own. That's the message. Take care. Bye.